Okay, I'd like to call the October 4th budget meeting to order. It's 6 p.m. and roll call. All the board members are present that are in the committee. Need approval of the agenda.
I can just add one thing, Jack. Under item 60, we have special education para. If I can just have a discussion also under there with English language learner para as well, just to pair that together.
I move to approve the agenda with that change.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have public comments. Did you receive any public comments?
No.
Seeing no public comments, we go into 2020 end of the fiscal year. Steve?
Thank you, Jack. So at the September board meeting, I provided each of these attachments to the board members in the board book, but as you know, it got a little bit later on in the night and didn't really have much of a chance to jump into any of this. But what I wanted to share with you is the annual meeting treasurer's report. That is the document that the treasurer will share with members of the public at the annual meeting in a couple of weeks. So we try to get that prepared in advance so you can get a chance to look at it. Basically, this provides a view for the public of all of the accounts and all of the funds that were audited during the audit process. So Jack typically is the treasurer. You would present this document to those in attendance or those viewing. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. A couple of just big picture items I wanted to note for folks. The general fund, or our main fund balance in the district, increased by $1.1 million last year. As we discussed quite a bit in the spring, there were a number of district accounts like transportation, substitutes, etc., that were operating at expenditure levels that were very low for that time of the school year. Of course, related to the fact that we had some or all of our, depending on the grade level, students in virtual learning. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the Employee Benefits Trust Fund, that's the fund for benefits for those who retire from the district, had an increase in fund balance of over $1 million. So that fund went from 6.6 million to 7.6 million and is actually in the same dollar amount as our Fund 10 fund balance. And back in 2008, that fund didn't exist. That balance was zero. So we made a significant improvement in where we are with post-employment benefits over time. So that's probably worth noting as well. And that's a very positive success story from going from a situation where all of those benefits were considered unfunded to the point today where we have over $7 million set aside for post-employment benefits. The other thing, the Fund 40 Capital Projects Fund, the decline in that balance was all planned by the board. That included the use of Fund 40 for the capital projects list that's approved by the board, as well as the board's contribution to the Warrior Pitch project at the high school. Does anyone have any questions about this, or Jack, do you feel comfortable presenting this in a couple weeks?
Well, then the Fund 40 is going to go away based on our approval, and it's going to go into Fund 10 so that we can improve our fund rating.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great point for you to mention, Jack, if you wouldn't mind, at the annual meeting, because that's definitely a shift from the board based on the report that we received from our credit rating agency with a concern about our fund balance, and the board reacted to that by moving back into utilizing Fund 10 to store the funds for our capital maintenance projects.
Yep.
Other than that, Rebecca, if you could go back for a moment and pull up the second attachment. This was the other attachment that I shared, the second of the third, second of three attachments that basically focused on similar information. This showed the beginning fund balance for each of our district funds, what account number is associated with that, ending fund balances. As you can recall, as a school board, you designate our fund balance accounts prior to the close of our fiscal year. This is just a report showing you at the completion of the audit, how did those account balances look? And then Rebecca, if you could show the other document. As a committee, the budget committee made a recommendation in the spring so that building and department budgets, the carryovers, would have a contribution back to the district. That discussion took place somewhere around May or June. So what you see now in front of you at the bottom of that screen is what those carryover budgets now look like for the buildings and departments across the district. You see that total is now over $1 million in designated funds for various building and departments. You can see the list and see the funds that are allocated based on the decision that was made by the budget committee in the spring. So this is here for your information. I'd be happy to answer any questions or just looking if any board members have any feedback or comments on this.
Any feedback or comments?
No.
I guess one of the things that I'd like to do is, you know, the reason that, you know, going back to, you know, allowing them to carry over, you know, from one year to the other is to really look at what are those building needs that aren't necessarily funded through budget from a line item. But what I'd like to see in May is what is that, you know, what is their plan to utilize these funds? You know, I think the other thing that, you know, has been brought up from the board standpoint is to put some of that training into an overall training budget, which is a line item which is going to help us become more efficient in allocating those dollars. So I would charge the administration to work with the buildings, you know, to come up with the plan. You know, because initially, you know, we had 1968 pianos that couldn't even be tuned anymore. You know, I'm sure there's other things out there where if they looked at their buildings, they could identify those items.
And the committee members can recall that in the spring, you asked for information from the buildings and departments with what were some of the things that they would be doing with carryover funds, depending on the decision that the budget committee made. And those documents would not be viewed as longer term planning documents, what Jack is referring to. And I definitely think that's something that we could incorporate into our budget planning process, where we could bring back a more longer term perspective so that we could look at, you know, what are the needs in the middle school? Is it family and consumer ed? Is it tech ed? Is it science? What are those needs? And to make sure that we're allocating resources appropriately.
And I think like you said, I think it's got to be more than just what's the next year. I would charge you to take a look at like a 2 or 3 year plan and say, do I have to carry some of these dollars over a period so that in year 2, year 3, I've got enough built up to meet the
I would suggest, I think actually, you know, a 3 or 5 year building plan for future targets would be helpful in the planning process to give a clear idea what some of the needs are that they're going to have to allocate and receive in order to do it. So I would support some kind of an idea like that as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Maybe something we could do on that item is just, I don't think it has to go to the board, but even the motion from this committee that just starts.
Right.
Desire for us to bring that back at a future during our budget planning process through this committee.
When is May would probably give you enough time to.
First draft of the budget comes in May. Does that work for you, Steve? Can I have that? Yeah, we can at least get it. I think getting that plan as part of the first draft makes sense.
So have it by May or April. So I would make the motion that the building principals bring back 3 to 5 year plan by April so that we can see their plan for these monies. Did you hear that, Mark? I made a motion.
I did, yep, I'll second it.
Thank you.
You think a 5-year plan is too long? Or I don't care.
I would start with 3.
Yeah.
If that makes
It's
sense
just
to me.
when you get out to 5 years,
Right.
things change.
Yep.
But if we could, I think, have a 3-year
A
plan.
rolling 3-year plan.
Yeah. So we have a motion and Mark seconded.
You want to change the motion? Or do we have to change that?
I said 3 to 5, so we can stay 3. 3 is good.
Are you agreeable with that, Mark?
Yep, I'll support that as well.
All in favor?
I
Aye,
Aye. Passes 3-0.
I don't see that needing to go to the full board. That can just be kind of a piece from the committee that we bring back as part of our accountability to this committee.
All right, thanks for that discussion. Have Eric joining us. You can see Eric on the screen. Eric works for our financial advisor, PMA. So thanks for joining us, Eric.
You bet.
I asked Eric to join us because the board is going to be making a significant decision at the end of the month about the topic of debt service defeasance and really tax rate consistency. A couple of years ago, the board heard a presentation from PMA on this topic, and the board made a decision to keep the tax rate the same and pay down district debt by about $2.1 million. So I didn't want to wait until the end of the month to really have that dialogue at the meeting where the budget's actually being approved. So I asked Eric to share some information with this committee and be available to answer any questions that you might have regarding this topic. I did include a debt service defeasance in the third draft of the budget that the board approved during the month of July. So it is in the budget right now. But as you know, the budget came together pretty quickly at the state level. The board gave us an extra week to incorporate that the governor's budget into our own budget planning process. But I want to make sure that a decision of this importance has the committee, you get a chance to ask any questions that you might want to ask. Eric has put together a brief PowerPoint that really does a great job of like just summarizing this at a high level and gives some examples about why a board would want to do a debt service defeasance and the kind of savings that could occur throughout that. So Eric, can I turn it over to you? Rebecca has on our end your PowerPoint up. Are you able to see that from your end?
I am, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
And Rebecca, just real quick, I'll just tell you next slide when I'm ready for you to click next, if that's okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Steve. As Steve said, my name is Eric Cass. I'm a Director of Public Finance for PMA Securities. I work very closely with my colleague, Michelle Weiberg, throughout the state of Wisconsin. Her name might be a little bit more familiar from the relationship here at PMA. Wanted to delve into and cover the topic that Steve outlined. I think from takeaways of this, number one, just want to give you a sense of what your mill rate has looked like over the last 10 years, and you're going to see some volatility in that. We're going to show you a little bit, narrow that down to the last 5 years. And then based upon the preliminary budget that you approved and the recommendation that Steve had in there for some potential defeasance this year, what your mill rate would look like, taking that into consideration. And then the final piece is to show you kind of two pathways for use of those funds, because that's kind of where the strategy comes in. I think it's kind of a two-part conversation. Number one is managing your mill rate and property tax levy this time of year. And then strategically, what are the options for you as a board for utilizing those funds long-term to help save interest, future property tax levy and stuff like that. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit of background, just level set a little bit further. So under Wisconsin state statute listed, a school board is allowed to levy up to and including an amount necessary to pay for the debt obligations of the school district. So what that means a little bit more simplistically is you as a school board could annually levy up to and including all outstanding principal and interest. And just from a perspective of Waunakee School District, I have listed there, as of the end of your last fiscal year, you have a little over $61 million outstanding in principal. So just keep that in mind, as that's kind of the universe that you have to live within. Obviously, when we get into the numbers, we're not even close to recommending levying the full 61 million, but just wanted to give you context of how that kind of fits in under state law. That additional levy is used for reducing future property tax levies, and it can be done in one of two ways. Number one is a prepayment of debt, which the school district currently has one of its outstanding debt issues that is prepayable or callable. And the second option is to do what's called a defeasance, and I'll explain a little bit of what a defeasance is as we get to that option. It's very similar to a prepayment, but it allows you the flexibility to kind of pay off debt that isn't callable today. And I'll again talk to you about how that works. Next slide. As I stated earlier, here's a little bit of a history of the mill rate for the Waunakee School District dating back to 2011-12. So you can see that it's kind of hovered around 1142 where it started, kind of jumped around a little bit, hit the high point of 1160, 1161. Then you saw it drop to 1136, and then it kind of settled in at that 1086, which I'm assuming, as Steve alluded to a little bit earlier, was the point in time where the strategy and conversation around levy management and managing your mill rate so that families can plan for what their tax bills are going to look like on an annual basis really started to come to fruition as we're seeing that 1086, 1086, and 1088 last year. Go to the next one. So kind of encapsulating it a little bit as we go back to 16, 17, 2021, 22 provides an opportunity to put that, if you could go up just a little bit, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but if you see the legend, what that orange sliver is what we call that additional levy, or as Steve alluded to, that defeasance opportunity that we'll talk about here in a minute. Because your property tax levy and your property values are increasing, you have an opportunity to make a strategic decision around levying what is currently an additional 3.1 million towards your outstanding debt service, that 61 million total outstanding that I talked about, and using that strategically to help drive down the long-term debt obligations of the school district earlier than maybe would have been expected when you originally issued the debt outstanding. I can tell you that this is certainly fluid. There's one major piece that hasn't been finalized by the state, and that is your equalization aid that will come on October 15th. But just this last Friday, equalized property values for all 420-ish school districts in the state were finalized. And Waunakee's came in at an increase of 8.04%, which I believe is a little bit higher, Steve, than what you had in your preliminary budget, but I think you were right in the ballpark of where you projected that to be as part of this conversation. Next slide. So that 3.1 million, that's the most imminent kind of decision that you as a board will be facing. So as Steve talked about, by October 15th, I believe it is, and you probably already have that meeting set, you're required to finalize the property tax levy for the 2021-22 school year. And then the next step of the conversation is what, if anything, do you do with those additional funds? So again, we are discussing this around roughly 3.1 million. And what we're looking at here is what we call a preliminary refinancing analysis targeted at your prepayable debt. So on the far left, and I will only talk through this once so you understand the structure, you have your before refinancing. So that is a $9.5 million debt issue that was dated April 3rd, 2013. Currently has 5.2 million outstanding, and that is your debt issue that as of April 1st, 2021 is considered callable. Really what that means is you can pay that off early without any penalty or any further costs. You can go to the investors and give them their money back, and you can save all of the outstanding interest moving forward. When you get to the right side of the screen, what we're looking at is the final 3 maturities basically being eliminated for the most part by a potential prepayment. And what that is going to do is you get all the way to the right is it is going to avoid future property tax levy on an annual basis. And you can see that it ranges from 1.3 million to about 620-ish thousand. And then what we do is we calculate down at the bottom right, what is the actual present value in real interest savings? So the present value probably isn't as important in this conversation as the gross savings is, as we kind of compare and contrast this to your other option from a strategy standpoint of doing an actual defeasance. So the gross savings or annual interest savings, the sum over the next 3 years is that 168,390. The present value savings as a percentage of the outstanding debt is 0.398, which is certainly lower than we normally see. And another key piece of this is we actually looked at with Steve potentially refunding this and lowering your interest rate. And although we are in an extremely historically low interest rate environment, you can see on the far left that your interest rate or your coupons on this outstanding are already very low at 2 to 2.5%. So there just isn't a ton of savings related to this debt issue to strategically use those funds. Go to the next slide, please. So then what we're going to look at is the second concept that I outlined earlier, which is called the defeasance. Now, before I talk through the analysis and the savings projection, what a defeasance is a tool that a school board has access to that allows you to prepay your debt that is not callable. So funds would be placed in what's called an irrevocable escrow, and actuaries, not actuaries, but CPAs have to verify that all the calculations are correct. So there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. When those funds go into that irrevocable escrow, they are no longer owned by the school district. And also the debt liability associated with that escrow is no longer a liability of the school district. So it's really a tool that allows you to set funds aside today to pay off debt in the future. And really what happens is those funds are then distributed on April 1st, 2023. You can see at the lower left that April 1, 2023 call date. So on that call date of April 1, 2023, any maturities that are identified through the defeasance would be paid off by the escrow agent at that point in time. And the interest would also be paid over the next two years, in this case, April of 22 and April of 23 for the school district by that escrow. So it's a unique tool that allows you to do that. So then we look at the analysis of this opportunity versus the callable debt. And you can see on the far right that there's Fund 39 savings, which is interest savings of over $1 million by setting aside that 3.1 or roughly $3.2 million in this example. And how that's created is by targeting the longest maturity. So you can see here on the left that you have these 2034 and 2035 maturities outstanding. When you get to the right after defeasance at the top in the blue, you can see that that 2035 is eliminated. And that has already partially been defeased in the past. That's why it's already 650,000. And then we eliminate all but 70,000 of that 2034. And the reason why we do that is by setting up the prepayment of those two longest, we're saving the most interest because we have the longest amount of time from now until 2034 and 2035. So on the far right, you can see that annually there's about $100,000 of interest savings, which is provided in property tax relief. This isn't budget savings, unfortunately, it truly is property tax relief. And then you'll see the larger property tax savings in 2034 and 2035 in this example. Again, kind of comparing that to the other one of 168,000 of total interest savings versus in this one, a little bit over 1.1 million. Now, the last piece I want to add before I open it up to questions is we talked about kind of the most imminent decision is around the property tax levy. So a decision on how to strategically use these funds from a prepayment or a defeasance really would be brought back to you as a school board after January 15th. Normally it's between February and April, dependent upon administration and timing of different agenda items that the board has to deal with. But we have to wait until those additional property tax funds come in, which would happen starting in January 15th. So no decision as you finalize your budget here, and I just want to stress that needs to be made around use of those funds. As I was talking with Steve, we wanted to give you a flavor of what those two options will be. Again, we'll have to reanalyze them as we get closer to spring, but those won't come back again until spring. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Sorry. You got to read that entire thing too before we're done.
Right. Any questions? Mark? John?
Nope.
No, makes sense.
You know, one of the strategies in using the debt defeasance is to keep your property taxes relatively consistent, or the mill rate relatively consistent, correct?
Correct.
And, you know, what happens when you go out for a referendum? You know, that really, your property taxes aren't going to be consistent if you go out for a big referendum.
Right. So I think this strategy does two things. Actually, if you go down one slide, please, is you're managing your mill rate and you are dealing with all the noise around property valuations and how much funding the state's going to kick in. That orange bar really provides the board and administration a lot of flexibility in terms of what their overall property tax levy and mill rate will be moving forward. Because that additional 3.1 million doesn't have to continue every year. So that can go away if the state takes away funding from your school district and you still have flexibility to manage to your $10.88. It can also be used potentially for any future capital needs or operational referendums because it, again, doesn't need to be there. So that's number one. Number two is you're really also moving forward with a strategy, and you already have used the strategy, as I said earlier, by doing a defeasance and shortening the amortization of your outstanding debt, which allows you to lower property taxes quicker and show the community that you're being good stewards of those funds. So it's really happening a lot in school districts now to help them plan for future capital and or operational needs, because again, they have flexibility in that mill rate, which is that orange bar, as well as they're creating pockets of opportunity by paying off their existing debt a lot faster, which allows them to potentially access, you know, capital needs a little bit faster than maybe they initially thought they could.
And just one thing I'd like to say to jump in, what we were really looking for really as an administrative team is an understanding from the board. Is this still a concept that you would like to see us work towards, so that at the end of October, we bring you a final fourth draft of the budget that has a tax rate that's consistent with what the tax rate was last year. Eric mentioned property values just came out. On October 15th, the state lets us know the final amount of our equalization aid. We have our enrollment count that has to factor into the revenue limit formula, and a few other changes that we'll need to make when we bring the final version of the budget back to you. But an overarching goal can be to look at an additional tax levy, and we'll calculate the exact amount that would keep the tax rate consistent from one year to the next, while at the same time saving dollars on the debt service schedule in the future. So we were just seeking confirmation from this committee that you are asking us to bring that back at the end of October. In contrast, if you were going to ask us not to bring that back, the document would look very differently at the end of October. So we wanted to make sure Eric could provide you with a high level overview, or what are some examples of what the board could do with the money in 2022. What would a stable tax rate look like? And then to be able to answer any questions you might have, so that when we get to the end of the month, we have your direction as far as where you want to go.
Steve,
Yep.
on my end of it, I support it. We started this venture about 3 years ago so that we could have a clear vision of what we can do in the future for our major capital project. And I think this allows us to maximize those potentials. So I, for one, would like to continue with this concept.
I would like to continue with it.
So if you want, I can make the motion to that effect.
the motion or? What we would like to do, thank you, Mark, for sharing your comments. What we'd like to do is have a discussion next Monday. It could be brief with this committee just reporting out that we had this dialogue and that this committee's directing administration to bring back a budget at the end of the month that would meet the goal of a stable tax rate.
Mhm.
So that's what we'd be requesting.
We'd like a motion to that effect from the committee. The
Sure.
board knows where the committee stands.
Were you able to hear that, Mark?
No,
What we'd be looking for, Mark, is a request, a motion from this committee to bring this concept forward to the board meeting next Monday night, that the budget committee is directing administration to bring back a final version of the budget that includes the concept of a consistent tax rate from this year compared to the last couple of years.
okay, I make the motion.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did you get it, Rebecca?
Anything else for Eric while he's here?
Thank you, Rick.
Otherwise, thanks for
Thank you,
joining
Eric.
us, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too, thank you.
Transportation.
So the first topic of transportation budget really then fits in with the next topic, which Tiffany's here to help discuss with us. So what I wanted to share with you, I know Randy shared his beginning of the year report with you at the September board meeting that shared how many routes we have in the district compared to what we had a couple of years ago, and some of the challenges we've had with hiring bus drivers. We are going to have savings in our transportation budget in excess of $200,000. And the reason for that is we're just operating fewer routes this year. Our community was incredibly responsive to our request for opt-outs again this year. So we did have a large number of parents say that they would opt out from utilizing our transportation system. And we were able to put in a system in place that had fewer routes. As a result, we have over $200,000 we won't be spending this year from what we were planning on it. One issue we're having though is a lack of drivers, and that issue remains, and we are having on a weekly basis, we are some days down to no additional drivers at all. We want to maintain that effort to seek drivers to help us as a district. We've been offering $1,000 sign-on bonus and $1,000 referral bonus for any new drivers. The discussion that I wanted to have with this committee is there is significant concerns that our existing drivers may seek these sign-on bonuses and referral bonuses in other districts. And they are seeing new drivers receiving an additional $1,000, while they as returning drivers are not seeing any incentive payment or retention payment. I wanted to get your feedback on whether or not you'd be comfortable with using roughly 25,000 between our regular and part-time drivers of the 200,000 that we won't be spending this year to authorize lamers to pay for a retention bonus for drivers that are coming back and are driving for us. So I just wanted to have that conversation to get your feedback on it. Again, it's not something we would approve, but it's something that lamers would be able to bill us if we agreed to it. So for any
Steve, how much are you talking about per retainment bonus?
what I would propose is $1,000, Mark, which is the
Okay.
same as what someone who would be
And
signing.
that makes total sense. Yep.
So when we signed up with Lamers, we were talking about incentives, we wanted on-time delivery, all of these kind of stuff. And if they met those on a quarterly basis, they would be able to get that incentive, which was supposed to go back to the drivers, or at least a portion of that. Is that not implement it, or did we not put that in the contract? Or
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So Jack's referring to is back when we went through the bidding process with Lamers. Jack, you had a major role in making sure we had a provision where if Lamers met specific data requirements, they had the ability to receive additional payments from the district. But the committee required the local drivers to be beneficiaries of that. And that program is in place. So Lamers has a $300 per month program in place for safety bonuses and other features related to what we had set up, as long as that data and those metrics are still being met. So we do have that program that is there to benefit existing drivers. But one thing that is a big concern from Lamers is that their drivers are seeing other districts offering up an incentive X, and we're very, very tight on our drivers. We're wanting to make sure we have every incentive possible to make sure that they stay here. So it's an idea. It certainly isn't something we have to do. It's just trying to make sure in this market of difficulty with drivers, we're doing everything we can not to lose the people we have. But yes, Jack, that program is in place.
is that a
It
set?
would seem to me in a crunched market where only the incoming drivers get the bonus, opens the door for our veteran drivers to leave for a bonus elsewhere and leave us in worse situation. So it seems to make sense. It makes great sense to me that the bonus, they receive a retention bonus comparable to what our new drivers or recruiting drivers would get. And so I'm in favor of the concept. We have the resources from unspent transportation available to help offset some of that cost. And if we don't want to have the labor problem, I think we have to solve the problem.
Did we pay Lamers to pay the drivers through COVID? You know, the drivers, I thought we paid them.
We needed to as part of some of the federal funds that we Stu. We had to keep some things full.
We did for a brief period of time, but last year, the entire year was actual routes driven, which was a major reason why we had $1.1 million remaining at the end of our fund balance, was because we were paying for routes driven. So as more students began coming back to in-person instruction, there were more routes and they would bill us accordingly. But for last year, no. But for that brief period of time from March into June, yes. And it was basically the same with Tahoe.
Right. So would this be a one-time?
It would just be a one-time. Yep. And again, we're hoping that we're not in the labor situation that we're in 6 months from now, 9 months from now. We obviously would like to continue to expand the pool of drivers. We do have a number of people who have responded to our sign-on bonuses. They're going through the process. We're actually having some school employees who've reached out as well. So it is working to catch people's attention.
So we got some school employees that want to drive like the F1 buses.
We potentially do, yes. We've had a couple of our coaches who reached out, yes.
So is that a sign-on bonus?
If they are new and they drive for 90 days. So we have a requirement with $1,000, we have a requirement that you drive for at least 90 days. We don't want to provide that and then have folks work for 30 days and then leave us. So it is tied to actually working for at least 90 days and beyond. So if someone signs up for like a 2-month season, no, they wouldn't receive it.
Well, I think we need to do everything that our bus drivers that we can. It sounds like we are so short. seems like we have the money, so I would be supportive of this plan.
So if we give it, they've got to stay with us at least 90 days.
At least, yep.
Then they could jump ship to a different district.
It is possible, but we certainly hope that our drivers continue to see with the program you referenced earlier, Jack, with $1,000, that we are committed to providing them with competitive wages and would prefer for them to stay here. So,
Steve,
yes, Mark,
is the plan to have a 90-day requirement for the bonus for them as well, or don't you think we need that?
I would continue with the 90-day mark. The same.
Very
as
good, thank you.
always.
Yep. Just want to be sure that was part of it.
So do we need a motion?
Just looking for feedback to see if the committee would support that effort, because the money will stay in the transportation budget. It would just be billed by Lamers for new staff, so.
I think we support it. So then we go on to special education van purchase.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Tiffany. Tiffany's gonna just talk a little bit about an idea that her and I have discussed. And we've got some rationale for it, but I don't know, Tiffany, can you just provide a little high-level overview of this?
Yeah, just like all of the other routes, obviously, we don't have drivers for a lot of our special education routes either. So that's been a struggle this year, and many of our parents we're paying them on a parent contract basis to bring their students to and from school. But we do have some families that are really eager to use schools for transportation as soon as it's available. We have 3 wheelchair-bound students right now that we aren't able to get to school on time because our drivers would have to leave school, then leave, go pick up the other students and come back, and it's really not appropriate for them to have a short day just due to a bus driver shortage. So their parents are bringing them right now, but are calling me on a regular basis, and I've been updating them in terms of what we're looking to do. And I also, at the beginning of the year, Steve said, let's look at other transportation agencies, like about 6 different mobile transportation agencies that kind of specialize in transport people with disabilities. And all 6 of them said the same thing, including Van Gogh here in town. Of course, they were my first call, and they said, we can help you with that at that time of day, because we're too busy at that time of day. So every single one of them said, we're in the same boat. We have just 2. So then I went to talking about could we purchase some school district vans, for special education that are specific. Not only then could we get our students to school on time, because the drivers wouldn't need CDL, it could be our internal employees that often are riding on a bus with that student anyway. So really they're making that trip out to that student's house and back every day anyway. So they can, if they go through the steps that are required in order for them to drive, they can actually be the driver. So then we wouldn't even be short staffed at buildings. That's their normal route, what they would normally do. And then we could also use the same vans. Obviously, they're not just going to be used for pickup and drop off beginning of the day, end of the day. They'd also be used during the day. Example, right now, we do have Van Gogh helping us to do a couple of our community routes for middle school when they do grocery shopping and some of those things, daily living skills types of trips. And just as an example, so once a week trip to the Piggly Wiggly is $60 a week. So I mean, adding that up over the course of, and that's just for a few kids to go to Piggly Wiggly here in town, so not a long trip. But that adds up over time too. So we just talked about not only could these vans be used for pickup and drop off, but also for our transition program, 18 and 21-year-old kids that need to get to jobs and some of those things, but also for middle school and other areas too, when we need to transport wheelchair transportation. That was our thing. I'll let Steve explain the money part of it. We've talked about a variety of different ways to fund it, and I think we came up with our final suggestion.
So just would the van pick up more than 1 student then, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
in the
we
morning?
would have 2 vans, so we have the ability to do 2, and they have two different types of vans. They do have one van style that will allow for 2 wheelchairs. It just decreases the seating in the rest of the vehicle, or we can do 1 wheelchair bound, and then it still has like the 2 captain's chairs and 2 front seats. So it's basically a regular size minivan. But you can get them with 2 wheelchair lifts in the back. So And then attached to is a quote for brand new vans. They're about 55,000 a piece. Then I also asked him, and he just sent it to me late this afternoon, but I asked him for a quote based on used vehicles as well, and they were at 47,000. So not a huge difference, and they would have 50,000 miles on them already. He just said because the used car market is really inflated right now, that you're not going to capture a lot of savings for used vehicles. And he also sent me a documentation that they are both the state contract for wheelchair accessible vehicles too. So.
And your staff has agreed that they drive these vans, or?
We're hoping to kind of put together a plan to help incentivize that so that they would maybe get a little extra, I don't know, a stipend or additional pay or something along those lines for doing that. Because again, it's not like getting a CDL. It's not like, you don't have to go through any of those hoops. You basically just have to walk through the insurance and clean driving record and some of those specific things for the district. So I'm sure would still maybe be some stress associated with that, but we would make sure that any staff that was doing that would be trained in obviously how to use the wheelchair accessibility lift part and all of those things too. So
Tiffany?
Mhm.
2 questions. Is there a vision to use these vans to help transport the students going to outsourced places down in Waunakee and other areas east of us where we do have students going for outsourced services? And second question, are there special ed funds that could help assist us with these purchases?
yeah, the first question is, the first question would be yes, if we had enough drivers to do our morning routes here for special ed. Because generally a lot of those routes that are going to alternate placements might run at the exact same time as our routes are running here. So that would really just depend. Next year, if we had more drivers and we could do our routes here, yes, we could definitely save money there by doing those longer routes ourselves.
Sure.
Mhm. Then the second question, yes, Steve and I have talked about, we could take some out of special ed. There's, again, Steve mentioned like the savings in the transportation budget and how that works. We also did get special permission from the Department of Public Instruction to be able to get categorical aid on the purchase. That's something that requires pre-approval. So we filled out the paperwork and got all the pre-approval for that already, just to make sure we could say, yes, we're gonna get categorical aid on this. Steve's
Perfect.
better at the exact number piece than I am, but that's kind of an overview at least.
So Mark, the state would pay us back about $30,000 of the 100,000 for the van purchase because Tiffany went through the process to get the pre-approval. So
Awesome.
if supported by this committee, we could reallocate transportation funds that we were gonna pay to Lamers.
Yep.
Buy a couple of vehicles ourselves. The state will pay us $30,000 back and really be able to provide better service to the students. And in the long run, this is a significant cost savings because
Yes.
a route costs $50,000 per year. So we would have an obligation to transport these students like we have in the past. Instead, we're taking that money we would have paid to Lamers on a route, buying a van, and being able to improve the service to families. And the other thing to keep in mind, within 2 years, the van and the driver costs, less than 2 years are paid for. The vans are gonna last 5 to 7 years at least.
Yep.
And so there will be long-term savings. And to Mark's point, the treasurers of the district in the past have noticed those large transportation costs for going to locations outside of the district. Tiffany and I view this as a trial to prove out that this can work. There's no reason why we can't do the same thing to invest in our own vehicles for support for students outside of the district as well. And in effect, we're going to be reallocating funds out of the transportation budget by doing so. So we think it's a win-win. Plus, by doing a pre-approval, the state helps pay for it.
So what do you need from us tonight, Steve?
we would just be looking for a motion from this committee to bring that concept forward to the October board meeting. And then Brian tomorrow is going to be sharing the driver piece with the HR committee as well.
I move we take this proposal to the full board for the next.
Second, thank you, Mark.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Unanimously passed. Are these cargo vans or are these standard,
There's standard meetings.
like a Honda Odyssey or?
Yeah. Voyager, Caravan, and we have a variety of different models, but yeah, just regular standards. That's
Okay, so then banking request,
No, special ed Paris.
oh, special, sorry.
Thank you, Jack. So the board approved the third draft of the budget in July. As you know, Tiffany has been in front of you a couple of times with changing needs for the special ed department as students have moved into the district. So she shared with you that as new students have enrolled, some of them have had needs for individual paraeducator time. And the board has approved additional positions a couple of times since the third draft of the budget has been presented. Tiffany also talked to you about when those positions were approved, that she had the ability to request from the DPI increases in funding called transfer of service for students who are moving in new to our community. So Tiffany's completed that process and it totaled $311,000. So what I'm just looking to do from the committee is confirm for you that you would like us to apply those funds to the paraeducator positions that have been approved. Mark mentioned earlier about special ed funds. We can use federal funds to apply towards positions of special education staff. However, you lose the state's payment back to us of the 30%. So my intentions would be to use the transfer service funds to connect them to special ed staffing so we can receive the 30% state categorical aid back from the district. But I've not had a chance to share this with the budget committee as we've not met since Tiffany has brought forward those requests for additional positions. Anything to add, Tiffany, at all?
I don't think so, other than, yes, we have big influx. I think I mentioned that we had about 35 new students just over the summer, and we got an additional 4 since the last time that I spoke with the board, that we just continue to grow and add students. And out of all of those students, I think we had 8 total that came to us with some type of one-to-one support need. And so that's where the paraeducator positions come in terms of providing that support. And we're still in a situation at one school, I don't know if I'm able there yet or not, Steve, but Prairie Elementary, we have 2 students there that their need, they were our students last year, so they wouldn't qualify for like transfer of service, but their needs have just changed significantly from last year to this year. And so that's an area where we really feel like our assistant principal and principal are spending the vast majority of their days supporting students with disabilities that need that one-on-one support and don't have it. So I'd like to bring a proposal next week to the board for an additional special education paraposition at Prairie.
Tiffany, lest I forget, first of all, I want to thank you for the great job you're doing. You've been very proactive, and I think this really benefits the district wonderfully and our students as well, more importantly. My concern is just a little yellow warning light flashing. We've been responding positively for advocacy of the para positions. My concern is, are the actual special ed teachers still coming up short with the help they need? Because with the number of paras we've added, I'm starting to wonder at what point do we need to hire a full-time special ed teacher to help round out the transitions and oversee the overall program.
Yeah, and that's a situation we ran into at the middle school this year, is we did end up adding a teaching position because we just didn't feel like we could cover the needs of all.
Right.
With that, in terms of Prairie, I would say I don't feel like we're at that situation yet in terms of needing to add a teacher, just because their caseloads are relatively small. Or what we're running into is all the teacher time is being allocated to students that don't necessarily have supplemental support that they need, so the teacher is not able to service all the kids on their caseload because of the needs of a couple of students. But I don't
Yep.
think, at least at Prairie, I don't think we're at a position where we need to add a teacher yet. But that's,
Okay,
I
Thank you.
agree with you, that's always a tough call, which
Yep. so do we
So what do you need from us?
pass a motion to move this to the full board, or what do you want, Steve?
Just looking for any feedback that you might have about the use of
Okay,
service funds, and if you agree with the concept of continuing to fund paraeducator positions with local funds so that we can receive the state contribution back to the district.
So a question, transfer of service, that's a one-time,
Nope, it's permanent.
it's permanent.
Yep.
You're looking for a motion for what's proposed here for the position.
okay, I move we forward this proposal or accept this. Are we moving it to the full board, or is it just us voting on it?
To the full board.
I'm sorry?
To the full board.
Okay, move we take the proposal to the whole board for approval.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
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 Jeff, I can just
Motion
add one
passed.
other thing here. I think when we adjusted the agenda, I wanted you to add in English language learners to this as well. I'm not gonna ask for a motion tonight, but more of a heads up for the committee, as this is still a developing need for us, that we have a meeting tomorrow on it, but it'll probably be something that will end up at Monday's board meeting. We've had a significant number of students move in from last year to this year with English language needs. Many of them that are, after we've gone through our assessments, are in the level 1 and 2, which is the most limited English. And the number of staff that we have to support them, particularly paras, et cetera, are just being pulled very thin. So that's definitely a piece that we're having a meeting on tomorrow. Our student services staff and our EL staff are meeting. There will be a proposal coming to Monday's board meeting that tries to outline some of our needs, but that wasn't prepared for tonight, so I don't have a proposal. It's more just a heads up for the committee, so you're aware of it.
Are you must have some type of plan. That 1, 2,
Well,
3, 10.
I think it's definitely at least at a minimum of at least a paraeducator, and it could be beyond that. But that's part of what we're trying to discern out tomorrow
Is that it then for that topic?
for that topic, yes.
So then should we continue on? Banking request?
Great, thank you, Jack. So Diane Kurtzborn, when she was assisting the district, put together a banking request for proposal. She brought that forward for this committee's review and feedback. As you can recall, Diane shared a timeline. That timeline included helping the business office and HR office get through the incredibly busy times of July and August before really jumping into this topic. So school board policy requires a review of banking proposals and services at least every 5 years. And so we were up to that point of going ahead and issuing that request for proposal. We did receive 4 responses back for your consideration. The proposals were highly competitive. We did see some proposals that are an improvement from what our current banking situation is. I did share with you in the notes that we do spend about $6,000 per year on banking services. We did receive 3 proposals of the 4 that had banking services at really low or no cost to the district, which would result in a cost savings to us. Those proposals were from the State Bank of Cross Plains, One Community Bank, and Fortify Bank. So the State Bank of Cross Plains proposal was different than what we're currently, the current terms of what we're operating with them right now. So in addition to the fees, we did have information that we requested from all of the banks on the interest rate that would be offered on district resources deposited at the local bank. The One Community Bank proposal includes both the lowest fees and the highest interest rate on district deposits. The State Bank of Cross Plains proposal is a no-fee proposal with a lower interest rate than the one that was proposed by One Community Bank. And then the Fortify Bank proposal included low fees, just a couple of fees in their proposal, but pretty close to no fees. But they had a higher interest rate than what the State Bank of Cross Plains proposed, but certainly lower than what One Community Bank proposed. The proposal from BMO Harris was competitive, fairly standard for what you would see in proposals for banking services. But it just happened to be in this case, we received 3 proposals with almost no fees at all in them. So that proposal was competitive, but not similar to the other 3 that we received. So I put a statement in there that overall the One Community Bank proposal includes the best financial value for the school district when you look at both fees and return on investment of district resources. It's the board policy to bring this to you every 5 years. We did include the proposals in there for your review. At this point, we're seeking input from the committee on how you would like to proceed on this topic of banking request for proposal.
We're currently using State Bank.
Yep.
Cross Plains.
That's correct. Yep.
So if we go to One Community Bank, we transfer all the accounts.
That's correct. Yep.
I feel very comfortable trusting your analysis, Steve, and if the Waunakee Community Bank is the best financial, or One Community Bank is the best option for us, I'd say let's go with them.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't?
I'm not aware of any reason, and many of my colleagues in Dane County who I know very well have banking relationships with One Community Bank in their community, and those relationships have been very positive. Examples are McFarland, Oregon. So they're active in those communities like they are in Waunakee, and Randy and I did meet with them a couple of years ago when they came into the community, and they shared that they had a strong interest in earning the business of the district, and were planning to put together a very competitive proposal, and they've certainly done so.
I would support your recommendation, Steve.
So you need a motion on that?
We would need a recommendation and a motion for the full board meeting next Monday night.
Jim, you want to make a motion on that?
Sure, I would make the motion that we go with One Community Bank by Steve's analysis.
Second,
All in favor?
I
Passed unanimously. That's the last agenda item.
Is it okay if I say?
Yeah.
So I just want to say I'm Steve Piotr. I'm President and Chief Executive Officer of One Community Bank. Along with me is my colleague Liz Dice. And I was at that meeting 3 years ago with Randy. I had an opportunity to talk about it. So my whole intention tonight was just for us to be here to answer any questions you have, and just to say thank you for the opportunity that you just put forward. It's been a pleasure to go through the journey. Excited to hear the motion and excited about the expanding partnership. So
We gotta
Thank you.
pass the full board meeting.
we look
We
forward to being back here in a week to talk about that as well.
Okay,
So
you're
thank
gonna be working with Steve.
you, Jay.
So anyways,
Thank you, Randy.
any future agenda?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jack. So typically, I just want to understand if the budget committee wants to meet between October 15th and the end of the month when the final budget and tax levy is brought forward to the school board. There have been some years where the budget committee said, just bring it back to the full board on that Monday. All 7 of us will be here because it's a very tight time frame.
Yeah.
There's been other years where the committee has wanted to meet. Do you have a preference either way?
I don't need
Take
it.
it to the whole
Just
board.
bring it to the whole board. Is that okay with you, Mark? Bring it to the
Yes,
whole board?
perfect. Yep,
Okay, thank you.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
Mark,
so move.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously.
Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, great to see you.
Good to be here. Nice job, everybody.
Hey, good deal.
Yeah, thank you.